Welcome to class. Welcome to chapter 1, everybody. We are going to talk about some basics of economics, a couple of principles. There's 10 of them, actually. We'll go over them one by one. This is kind of an intro, a foundation for the rest of this class. Really what you're going to look for is the answers to these questions in this class. So, first of all, my hope is that today I give you guys kind of the bird's eye view of the questions that economics addresses, since this is probably most of your guys' first economics class. What are the principles of how people make decisions? What are the principles of how people interact? What are the principles of how the economy as a whole works? So we're going to be thinking about each of these things. There's a couple of summary points. They're called principles. I mean, that's the textbook's word, not mine. In ways of understanding how economics works. Okay, so first of all, what is economics all about? Well, I probably don't need to tell you this, but there's this thing called scarcity out there. We don't have unlimited budget constraints, so we need to somehow assign what we have to be able to get an outcome that we want. So, if I have $50, I can only buy $50 worth of things. What do I buy? If I have only 40 hours in the week to do something, right? I might have a budget constraint as far as time goes as well. And so there's scarcity. Then there is economics. Economics is the study of the scarcity and why people make certain decisions. Okay? This, to me, is the definition of economics. What I think a lot of people think that economics is money, dollars and cents. It can be applied to money and dollars and cents, but decision-making process is like the idea behind economics for me. The decision-making process. Why do people use their limited amount of money or limited amount of time or limited amount of whatever to purchase or to buy or to make some sort of outcome? So that's economics. It actually comes from a Greek word. See if I can spell this right. It's Greek, so I'll spell it in Greek. Oikonomia. This means household, and this means like the rule or the custom of the household. So really what you have is you have a household and you have like the budgeting system of the household or something like that. That's originally what economics comes from. That's not going to be on the test, don't worry. But I think it's interesting. So that's why we get the term economics from. And so what are the kind of things we look at? We're going to look at how much people decide what to buy, or how people decide what to buy, and then how much of it to buy. Firms, we're going to think of not just individual people, but also individual companies or individual firms. We have how much does an individual firm produce? How many workers do they need? And finally, we are going to look at how society as a whole, and we'll do very little of this because this is more of the idea of something in a macro class, but there are some scope in our micro class to look at how society as a whole divides its resources between whatever it is that society purchases. Bombing Iraq, helping homeless veterans on the street, whatever the things that United States or whatever any country decides to spend its resources on. Okay, so let's look at this first principle. Number 1, people face trade-offs. Okay, this hopefully is kind of like a no-duh slide to you, right? Everybody faces trade-offs. Here's some example. If you go to a party the night before the test, well, I mean, you had a good time. That's nice. That's a plus. The trade-off is you're probably not going to do as well on the test the next day, right? So this is not super counterintuitive. Having more money to buy stuff is great, but you have to work more hours to get that money. If you work more hours, you have fewer hours in your day to enjoy the stuff you just bought. Okay, so that's a trade-off. Think about protecting the environment. I need to dedicate some resources to cleaning up environment and making it cleaner. I'm left with fewer resources for production of whatever else that I want to buy. Okay. So a big trade-off in society as a whole is this idea of efficiency versus equality. Let's define those real quick. Efficiency. To be totally efficient means that our company or our individual or our country or our society is utilizing all of the inputs and the production technology to get the most output possible. And equality, on the other hand, is when prosperity is distributed equally among people. Now, at first blush, you might think, why is this a trade-off between efficiency and equality? Right? You might not necessarily think that those are mutually exclusive, and it's true that they're not. However, it has been shown, and it is quite known that when we pursue equality by perhaps doing cash transfers from people with more prosperity and transferring to people with less prosperity, it tends to make people work less hard, everybody. And if you got people that are not working as hard as possible, is this an efficient situation? No, right? Because in order to have an efficient situation, everybody has to be kind of working as hard as possible. So, so there's what I was just kind of telling you. It's, if you think of it kind of like a pie, I like to think of kind of the economy, right, as a pie. Some people have big slices, and some people maybe have really small slices, right? Now, it might seem to make sense at first to go ahead and, I don't know, maybe readjust the size of this pie to achieve this goal. This is a good goal, right? I mean, I'm all for equality. I'm all for fairness, right? Maybe adjust the size of this pie by taking some of this guy's slice and putting it up here. We've got this problem, though. It makes things less efficient, right? Because then this guy's like, well, I'm not going to work quite as hard because some of my money's going to get taken away. This guy's like, I'm not going to work quite as hard because I'm going to get some for free anyway. So it tends to actually shrink the size of this pie. So another way to think about, I think this is kind of maybe a good way to think about this. We want to help this guy with a small slice, totally, right? Instead of maybe thinking of adjusting the size of the slices, well, theoretically, I guess if you just make the pie bigger, right? I'm not actually talking about baking pies. I'm talking about our amount of goods we produce in society. If you make the pie bigger, look, by definition, the slices all get bigger, right? So now this guy has a bigger slice because this is his big slice. So that's one way to look at expanding access to goods for people who have really small slices. I think it tends to go over better with the big slice people because, you know, instead of making their slice smaller, you're making their slice bigger too, right? So this is an important way of thinking, one way that you can make at least one person better off without making anyone else worse off, okay? And so the idea of the pie, maybe we'll come back to that in this class. We're going to look at expanding the size of the pie instead of rearranging the slices. Okay? All right. Principle number 2. The cost of something is what you give up to get it. So, no duh, right? The cost of something, I go to Walmart and it says $4.99 and I give the guy $4.99, right? But there is a cost that you're missing out of. It's the cost and benefits of the alternative choices too. So instead of being in Walmart right there giving the guy $4.99, you could have been, I don't know, out working or hanging out with your girlfriend or doing something else that brings pleasure to you or brings happiness to you or somehow accomplishes some objective of yours, right? So we're missing out. We're missing out on an important cost. So when you think of all of the costs together, that's called the opportunity cost. So it's the sum total of everything you have to give up to get something, right? The actual dollar cost that the sticker price at the store gives you, that's part of the opportunity cost, but it's not the whole entire thing, okay? It's everything that you have to give up to get it. And so that's actually the important cost in this class when we're talking about deciding which outcome, okay? So here's an example. The opportunity cost of going to college is not just the money you pay and the books you buy and the fees, right? So you come here fall semester 2014. What are you guys paying? Like $5,500, maybe around $6,000 for tuition and fees, okay? Something like that. maybe another $300 for books. So let's say grand total you're out the door $6,000 just looking at the tuition. But the fact of the matter is that's not the only cost that you're paying to be here in my class right now and to be in all your classes, right? Let's suppose that you guys could get a job for, I don't know, $12 an hour. Most of you guys probably don't have bachelor's degrees yet, right? So you just have high school diplomas, so probably $12 an hour. You're going to sit in class for 3, 6, 9, 12 hours a week times 16 weeks. That's a large number. Times the amount of dollars that you could make in that time. So you're going to have a cost that actually is going to be greater than the cost you actually pay to get in here. Okay? And so we have to look at all of this as the opportunity costs. Okay? So, I mean, maybe you guys have thought of that before, but maybe you haven't. And so this idea of opportunity cost for some people can be kind of, I don't know, surprising. You're like, whoa, college really cost me $250,000? I did not know that, right? But it sure could. And so in the same way, seeing a movie is not just the price of the ticket, but it's the time value of the time that you were in the movie theater. Maybe you could have been doing something else during that time. Okay? So that's principle number 2. Principle number 3. Rational people think in the margin. We got to define some stuff. First, we got to define rational people, and we probably should define what the heck is thinking in the margin, too. So, rational people. This is kind of my best attempt at a decent definition of it. So we got people who systematically and purposefully do the best they can to achieve their objectives. Okay? So, essentially, if I understand what someone wants, i.e. their objective, and I understand their kind of thinking process, I should be able to sort of predict the way that they're going to go about accomplishing their objective, because I know that they want to accomplish this objective as much as possible. Okay? I'm not counting on anybody to be self-sabotaging their own objectives, if I understand it, right? If I see somebody who appears to be sabotaging their objective, I realize that maybe they have some other objective. I don't know. It's to be a person whose life looked like it got sabotaged or something like that, right? So I make this assumption: rational people pursue their objectives systematically. Okay. And what does this mean that they think at the margin? So they evaluate costs and benefits of marginal changes, not of everything that they've spent or gotten as a benefit. Okay. So imagine that I am in a factory. I'm a manager at a factory, and I've already produced 100 units of the good, right? If I'm trying to figure out whether or not I should make a 101st unit, in my assembly line, I'm going to not think of how much I've wasted or gained from the previous 100 units. I just need to say, okay, what's the revenue that I get from this next product? What's the cost from producing the next product? Is the revenue greater than the cost? Okay, boom, I do it. All right. It's the only place that I need to be doing my analysis. Okay. So here's an example. When you decide to go to college for an additional year, you compare how much it costs to how much it benefits of just the next year. You don't think of all your years of schooling that you've had previously, right? You're just thinking at the margin. That just means the very next step. And then the example that I just gave you, right? When you're trying to figure out whether or not to make quantity one more quantity, you compare the cost with the benefit of just that next additional step. So it's a little bit interesting, these ideas, it's really a new way of thinking, perhaps. And the reason why we think this way is because, believe it or not, this is the way of thinking that best represents people's decision-making processes, right? Chances are we're not even aware that we're doing this stuff, right? It almost seems odd that we have to be instructed to think rationally, because that's the best way that we can represent people, of which I am a person, right? But it's true. We're just kind of making explicit what economists and many social scientists believe, or the way that many social scientists believe that people actually act in life. All right? Principle number 4. This one probably shouldn't come as a big shock to you. People respond to incentives, right? Incentive can be good or bad. You can have a positive incentive, a reward, a negative incentive, a punishment. Right? Because we're rational, you give us an incentive to a person, and they're gonna change their behavior in some way, right? If it's a prospect of a negative incentive, I'm probably going to steer my behavior around the negative incentive. It's a positive incentive, I'm going to probably head towards a positive incentive. Okay? Here's an example. Gas prices rise. That's an incentive. I don't want to have to pay extra money. What do? Maybe I change to buying a hybrid car, or I buy less SUVs. What's another outcome that could change, actually? Instead of just buying new cars, what else could you do if gas prices go up? Don't drive. Right. Ride your bicycle or something. I don't know. Exactly. Okay. Here's another one. When cigarette taxes increase, teen smoking falls. Right. Incentive. Higher taxes. People, teens especially, because they can't afford these higher taxes, they smoke less. To be honest, with higher taxes, pretty much everybody's going to smoke a little bit less, right? Because it costs more. But the people who are hit hardest by the tax are probably the people with the lower income, which maybe we're thinking are younger people, right? Older people. Maybe they earn enough money, and so they're not going to really care about the taxes much. Okay. Another example of an incentive. Any questions so far? All right, let's do this problem together in class. Okay. Let me ask who would like to attempt A? Anyone? Okay. Yes, sir. For A, you should. Okay, I agree with that. Tell me why. Outstanding. You pay $600 to get it repaired. You make another $800 in value, right? It was $5,700, but it increases in value to $6,500, $800. So, like this guy said right here, you net $200 extra that you wouldn't have gotten, right? But what about those you already spent $1,000 on repairs, though. What's that about, right? You're only making extra $800, and you already spent $1,000 on repairs. Does this even matter? No, right? Because you spent $1,000 on repairs, it's done, it's water under the bridge. It's not my marginal step, right? So here's an example of a situation where you guys were thinking marginally, and you might not have even known that terminology before walking into this class, right? The reason why I'm teaching you guys that idea that rational people think at the margin is because I think that's kind of how people actually think. We're not really cognizant of it, but this is how we're thinking about it, okay? And who can do B? Anyone? Yes, sir. Brilliant. You'll be losing $100. Run through the math real quick. How'd you get that $100 that you're losing? Okay, I think you're so close. I think it's $6,000 with a working transmission, but that car is only actually worth $5,400 to you because it took $600 to have it. So it's $5,400 plus $5,500. And that's the extra $100, the $100 you're losing. But that's completely the right answer. That B you definitely don't want to, right? So here's exactly what we said. The benefit of fixing the transmission is $800 in part A. So you do it because it only costs $600, right? I compare the benefit to a cost. The other side is that if I change the incentives, that it's only worth $500, the benefit's only $500, suddenly I don't want to change the transmission. So really, this is important. The $1,000 that we previously spent is called a sunk cost. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. The important thing is the cost of the marginal repair. And the change in the incentives is what caused us to change our mind, right? So people responding to incentives and these rational people are acting on the marginal incentives. All right, let's move on to the next principle. This is principles of how people interact. Number 5, trade can make everyone better off. So rather than trying to produce everything yourself, that's called being self-sufficient, we find it's more useful to separate, specialize, become really good at making something, and then trade with someone for something else that they're really good at. This is kind of, maybe we're used to this. It works not only individual level, but also on the country level. Oops, trying to go forward here. So countries can purchase products from another country, or maybe they can get the goods for cheaper, and maybe they can get something that's cheaper from a purchase abroad, and they can specialize in making something else that they can therefore trade with the other country. Okay, if we tried to make everything our own, our individual selves, everything we needed, like we wouldn't have phones, because I don't know how to make cell phone, right? We wouldn't have cars. At least I wouldn't, because I don't know how to make a car. Okay, so that's principle number 5. Number 6, markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. We need to define a couple of things here. We need to define market. We need to define what the heck does organize economic activity. So first, market. We got buyers, and we got sellers, and we got a product. Boom. That's a market. All right, it's a very simple, easy definition. It doesn't have to be all in the same spot. eBay, for example, not everybody's in the same location. That is a marketplace. And what the heck does organized economic activity mean? Well, we want to let this market, which is just a bunch of people, buyers, sellers, and stuff, we want to let them make these decisions. What should I produce, how to produce them, how much, and who gets them? Okay? For those of us who spent most of our life, or all of it perhaps, in America, where we have kind of this idea, we allow the markets to organize economic activity, that may not seem shocking to you, right? But as we know, not all people share the same idea. That some people think maybe it's better to have one person, someone who maybe really cares about everybody, making output decisions, right? So this person says, okay, this company is going to make, I don't know, so much of this product and then distribute it to these people who need it or something like that. The idea for this principle is that you can't do better than just letting a bunch of people, buyers and sellers, organize the economic activity all alone, which is kind of crazy, because this market is, when we rely on this, it's called a market economy, okay? And that is, for the most part, what I think America, what we're used to kind of tries to look like as a market economy. It's a bunch of decentralized decision makers, right? So it's not any one person that's saying, okay, let's take this as a goal and let's do this, which is best for our society. It's really just a bunch of people. What is a marketplace? Think of anybody ever been to a flea market or a swap meet or something like that, right? Bunch of buyers, a bunch of sellers, and everybody's haggling, aka trying to rip each other off, right? So we got all these rational people. Why am I calling them rational? Well, because they're seeing something that they want and they're trying to maximize their happiness. That's their objective by getting it for, well, if you're the buyer, the cheapest price possible, the seller, the highest price possible, right? So we got this big group of people only trying to rip each other off, only caring about themselves, right? I mean, they're not caring about the welfare, the well-being of everybody in the whole place. But it just so happens that when we have this market economy, a bunch of people in a place trying to rip each other off, trying to make themselves as happy as possible, it ends up being best for society under a strict set of assumptions, okay? And I'll quickly go through these assumptions next slide. But the guy who thought this up, his name is Adam Smith. You should be aware of this guy. 1776, so it's a while ago. What else happened in 1776? Who remembers? Our country happened, yeah. Well, we signed the Declaration of Independence, right? Okay, so this is a while ago. But he said that each of the households and firms, any individuals, they act if they're led by an invisible hand, right? Kind of creepy sounding. to promote general economic well-being. So when I let these people come together in this place called the market, and why is it called the market? Because there's people who are trying to buy and sell there. That's all it is. And they're haggling with each other, aka trying to rip each other off, trying to get the best price possible. It just so happens, under a strict set of assumptions, which we'll talk about, that if you just let everybody do that, it ends up being best for society. Okay? So even today, that sort of even sounds revolutionary, kind of shocking if you've never heard of that. Trust me, in 1776, that was really, really weird, right? You're like, wait, you're just letting everybody just try to rip each other off and it's going to be best for everybody else? Like, how is this going to happen? So there's a set of assumptions, and we'll talk about the three things that, it's actually the next slide. Right now, how does that work? Through the price. Because what happens is buyers and sellers argue, and then they come to a price where everybody's happy, right? Or if nobody's happy, then they don't have a price at all, okay? And then people are more happy. But they set a price in which both parties are happy, okay? And then the buyers who want the good more than that price buy the good. So buyers are happy. The sellers who can produce less than that can sell, right? So we got buyers and sellers, and so the prices are kind of like the signal post for the buyers and sellers in the marketplace, and for the houses and the firms that allows them to get the goods they desire. Why do they desire it? Because they value it more than the price. And not have to have the goods they don't desire. Why don't they desire it? Because they value it less than whatever the market price is. Okay? So that's how it happens. But, remember these assumptions I told you. It doesn't happen all the time. So, if it breaks, if one of these assumptions are violated, we need the government to step in and kind of fix things or something, or just try to enable the society to reach the level of well-being that they would have if one of these assumptions wasn't broken. One of these assumptions is that we need property rights. Okay? What does that mean? That means that I can't just come up to you and steal your stuff. I think you can probably see how this is necessary, right? So we definitely need property rights. If I can just go up to you and steal your stuff and then leave, well, there's no real need for me to work, right? Because I can just go up and steal something from you. And so am I being totally efficient? Is our society being completely efficient? No, because I'm not producing whatever it is that I could be producing, right? So one of the assumptions that is required for the market outcome to be best for everybody is property rights. Okay? So those are really, really, really important. This is basically what I just said. You're less inclined to work or to save if you just think someone's going to steal it from you. Okay? The other ways that the other assumptions that we need for the market are not having externalities and not having market power. If we have any of these, if we have externalities or we have market power or we don't have property rights from the previous slide, we have this thing called a market failure. So what does that mean, market failure? Basically, that means that this invisible hand thing's not working. Right? The people are getting together, they're trying to rip each other off, and whatever they decide on is not best for society. That's called a market failure. And so if you have externalities, what are they? It's when the two people who are bargaining, trying to buy something, trying to mutually rip each other off, really, if their decision affects somebody externally, right? If it doesn't just affect themselves, that's called an externality. And then we've got problems. Okay? We'll go on that further later on in class. Also, market power. We have to have two small buyers and sellers. We can't have one big, say, monopoly seller that's bullying everybody into buying for their price. Right? Clearly, that's not going to be best for the whole society. Okay? And so, if any of these exist, market power, externalities, or if there's no property rights, we get this thing called a market failure. And then there is a reason for the government to step in. Okay? So even though principle number 6, I just told you that markets all by themselves are kind of a good way to organize economic activity. Remember, there's that set of assumptions, which I just gave you. There's got to be property rights, got to be no externalities, got to be no market power. In that kind of special world, yes, markets work to maximize everybody's happiness or society's well-being. But if I have any of those assumptions not met, there's a reason for the government to get involved. All right? Cool. Oh, and public policy is what we call it when the government gets involved. Public policy. It can promote efficiency, or it can promote equality, right? So it can promote efficiency and it can promote equality. These are two goals we might have for our society, but when it's only the government really, there's a scope for the government to come in and fix either the equality or the efficiency problem when the market is not following those couple of assumptions that I gave you guys. All right. So, if this last point is saying that if I want to shift the size of the pie from the people with the bigger slices to the people with the smaller slices, we can use tax or welfare policies. These obviously the government has to do. We can't tax each other, but the government can tax us. So that's a role for the government. Okay, let's go through these 4 things. We'll do it together, but we'll ask ourselves if on any of these 4 things, these are candidates for the market economy, meaning letting the market do it all by itself, or if we have some of those assumptions that are violated, meaning we need to get the government involved. Okay? Public schools for kindergarten through 12th grade. Okay? The idea is schooling a K through 12 kid, right? So we have the student, I guess we have the school. They could theoretically, I guess, engage in a transaction where the kid promises to pay the school a certain amount of dollars to receive some certain amount of education or something like that. And if those were the only 2 people that were affected by that decision, well then, we know that we should just let the market work, right? Let it be a market economy. However, there's something really big in schools. When my kid goes to school, or when your kid goes to school, or when you go to school, you learn things, you can affect other people in positive ways, right? So, if you remember, one of the assumptions is that there's no externalities. There's definitely an externality here, okay? Because my schooled child can treat other people in a different way, maybe help them, maybe just be nicer to them. I don't really know. There's a bunch of different ways. But this violates the no externality assumption. So can we let the market take care of education? No. And that's why the government has stepped in and provides free schooling for kindergarten through 12th grade. And actually, for all of us in this room, subsidize schooling even through college, right? So the government pays part of my paycheck, and they pay part of your education. Okay, workplace safety regulations. That also has the externality problem, right? If some person at their work gets injured, then it might affect their family because they can't bring money home. It might affect other people, external parties. Okay, so there's an externality problem. So the government needs to step in and set workplace safety regulations. Okay, public highways. I guess theoretically, me and you could come together and we could pay a construction firm to build us a road from our house to CSU Fullerton, so we can drive here, right? Theoretically, you could do that. But is this a good candidate for letting the market economy work? No. The reason why, let's say that this half of the class, we all decided to pay the construction company and get on the road. This half of the class is still probably going to drive on our road anyway because it's more convenient, right? In essence, they're like stealing the road because you can't really exclude people off a road. And so the problem is it's really hard to enforce property rights on a street, right? So we have this property right problem. It's not easily enforceable. So this is not a good candidate for letting the market economy take place. And also patent laws, right? What are patent laws? Let's say that me and you, we invent something awesome, but then some other person decides just to copy it and sell it, right? That's a form of stealing too, right? So we have this property right problem. So we have to protect patents. How does the government protect patents? By granting monopolies. Or how does the government protect good ideas? By patents. So that's the reason behind patent laws. All right, now we're going to go into the last three principles. These kind of have more of a macroeconomic flavor, but just to kind of give you guys an idea of the economy as a whole and the field of economics as a whole. Here's the first one. A country's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. So a standard of living, a living standard, that's, you can think of that, how rich is a country, right? How much is their average GDP per capita or something like that? The direct determinant of the wealth of an individual country has to do with how productive the individuals in that country are. Okay, it's very, very clear. If you look at, and I mean, is there a difference in costs or in standards of living? There's huge, right? The rich countries are on average 10 times richer than the poor countries, and that's just in groups. There's individual countries that are like 80 times richer than other countries, right? So there is this difference in living standards. Even in the United States, if you look at us now versus 100 years ago, we're 8 times more productive. We have 8 times higher standard of living, which means that we're being many more times more productive. Okay, that is what is the most important determinant of living standards. Now, there's others. I'm not saying the only reason behind changing living standards is productivity, but it's the main driver. Okay, so if you can get a group of people in the society to be more productive, the society as a whole will have higher living standards. The idea is if people are working harder, we're going to be able to make a bigger pie. Okay? And, well, what makes people productive? Is it just that they're better? Not necessarily. Is it just they're working harder? Not necessarily. The biggest piece of productivity is tools, right? And so we have physical capital, things that people can have. Maybe, me and you working in America, we get to use tractors, and in some other country they get to use shovels, right? Clearly we're going to be more productive. We're not any better or any harder working. There's also human capital, the ability to have education and know how to do the job even better, okay? Other factors, right? There's a lot of different things that have people think have something to do with the standard of living. Labor unions, right? Maybe too cheap products coming in from abroad. Much smaller part. Productivity tends to be the big driver in a country's ability to have high living standards. Okay? All right. Principle number 9. Prices rise when the government prints too much money. Inflation. That means that prices overall are getting more expensive. Maybe you've sat and thought, why do prices get more expensive? Why is a computer, or no, that's a bad example. Why is a stick of chewing gum more expensive now than it was 50 years ago? It used to be like 3 cents or 5 cents, right? Have you ever sat down and thought about that? Well, first and foremost, this is what the great economists tell me. I am not Milton Friedman. If you guys want to look up a smart guy, look up a guy named Milton Friedman. But he says, and most economists agree with him, first and foremost, inflation comes from the fact that the government is printing too much money. Right? We only have a set number of goods to buy. The government's printing money. Money is used to buy the goods. When there's too much money out here, well, the prices all have to raise in order to soak up this extra money out there because that's what the money's being used for. Okay? So that's the idea. And when there's more money out there, the value of each dollar is less. When a dollar buys less, stuff is more expensive. Okay? And the faster the government prints, the faster the prices go up. They're directly linked. Okay? And this is true. There have been times in our world, it's generally brought on by severe economic hardships such as war, but there have been times when the government was just printing money so crazy that prices, this never happened in America, but in many other countries, prices were changing 2 or 3 times per day. They were going up. The government was just printing so much money that the inflation rate was out of control. Okay? And then finally, inflation can be helpful. Printing too much money can be helpful in the short run because it makes unemployment go down. Okay? So, for example, if the government prints more money, before all the prices have a chance to go up, everybody feels richer because just there's more money out there, right? So people start working harder and buying more stuff, which means that fewer people are unemployed because everybody needs to hire more people to produce more goods, right? So unemployment goes down in the short run when inflation goes, when money is printed. But then what happens? We give it a little time, maybe a year, maybe only 6 months, maybe 2 years. It's unclear exactly when. The prices start slowly to creep up because there's just all this extra money out there, so the prices have to raise up to soak up all the extra money. And now I'm left with higher inflation, higher prices than before, and everybody goes back to being unemployed anyway, right? Because it was like a fake unemployment boom. There's just extra money thrown in there, right? So in the short run, I can make unemployment go down. In the long run, unemployment goes back to where it's supposed to be, and I'm just left with higher prices. That's what happens. That is what happens, and that's like kind of an oversimplification. There's other deeper ideas to it, but for the most part, that is. If people are thinking, well, why is the government printing too much money? Because it's really useful for some things. It makes people feel like they have more money. Okay.